Hot squile, good day everybody. I'm Senaqwila Wyss and I've been a summer student with the Wildbird Trust for about 5 years now. So I was traditionally trained in traditional plant teachings from my mom, Toitstanat Wyss. And so I'll be sharing some information. In the Squamish language we call bees sesamite, and we call flowers spockum. So we can look at not only flowers but other plants. It will help to train and educate you about the relationship of pollinators and specifically bees and many different kinds of plants. So here we have the Pacific crabapple. So it's a really wonderful for bringing different diverse kinds of pollinators. So definitely bees will be very attracted to the small flowers. So before they go into bloom for producing apples, the fruit, the flowering stage is very important. So the bees play such a large role in helping ensure that the plant will have the fruit being able to produce. So it's really exciting because it will start smaller and it gets bigger. So it's also important to have different levels about which heights that bees will be going to. So we'll be covering different stages from including ground cover to flowers, shrubs, and to trees. So with having trees, it is great to have such a height variance for bees to be able to go and find different sources of pollen. We have the Garry oak, and this one is a little bit surprising. It's a little fun fact that Garry oak, they do have very small, inconspicuous flowers that grow very early in the spring. So when we think about pollinators, we do often think about the most bright and showy flowers, but it is also very fascinating to look at the variety about which trees and which other plants will have small flowers, and even the smallest flower can make a difference for bees. So that's very good to know that while we might not know the Garry oak for the showy flowers, they do still provide pollen and nutrition and a good staple for bees. For this kind of unique shape, they're quite similar, the bald hip rose and the Nootka rose, which are both indigenous roses to BC area. We can tell with the way that they are really very kind of wide open. Some of the flowers we look at are in a nice variety of shapes, whether they're closed or whether there's tons of very tiny little flowers close together. So with the way that the nice broad individual flowers of the bald tip and Nootka roses, this one is the bald hip rose, you can see it almost kind of looks like it could be a nice little bee bed. So often I have really seen different bumblebees and different varieties of indigenous bees will come in and they can do their job working around pollinating. But it is also kind of nice during the hot summer days. They actually sometimes get very relaxed, and they also even sometimes get a little bit sleepy, and they sometimes even just fall asleep right inside there, the middle of the roses. So it's great to see the variety of how bees will be interacting with different flowers. This one can be kind of that quick job of flying from each flower to flower, but sometimes they also get a nice little rest and they can have a nice moment where they actually just lay down and relax. So it's really wonderful to see the colors of the fuzzy little bumblebees while they're inside of the flower. So it's really great to have that shape variety for pollinators and bees to interact with. Okay. We all know that during the winter that bears are animals that hibernate. But did you know that for different bee species, there are also different varieties of bees who will also hibernate? And so instead of a large cave or different habitats such as bears have for their hibernation, the salmonberry is a very special plant. And so during the winter, they will lose all their leaves and they will have quite hollowed out stems. So this, beside our potted salmonberry, this is a stem from a much older salmonberry. And so this would have been still bare from during last winter. So even with the very delicateness of having my nails scrape in, you can tell that the inside very easily can be given a little bit of hollowing out. So a number of different indigenous bee species. So when we think of bees, we often think of their homes, such as honeybees, in a very large communal hive. Whereas there are many different indigenous bee species, rather than having a large hive, or such as wasps who also have hives, they have more of an individual lifestyle for bees that live during the winter. Their hibernation, such as mason bees as well, if you've ever learned about the building a mason bee home, you can have hollowed out stems, and so naturally what they will do is either find hollowed out ones, or you can have ones that are easily kind of hollowed out by themselves, the bees. So going inside of hollow stems, that will provide a safe, dry, warm winter home, their habitat. So essentially they will be sleeping pretty much the entire time, such as bears' hibernation. But the salmonberry not only has the flower that supports bees during the kind of the on season, during the spring and the summer, but in the off season, so to speak, bees will have it as their kind of little bee hotel, you could imagine. So they'll be hibernating inside, and once they've have it to the hollow amount to their liking, they will then be able to gather things such as leaves, flower petals, and they will then encase and seal the door, so they are fully enclosed before they enter their hibernation phase for the winter. So our next plant, I've known the name Saskatoonberry, but this one goes by many names. It is also commonly called Serviceberry. So during the spring, you'll be able to see these nice delicate white flowers as well. Many of the berries do have a white flower to them. And so with the Serviceberry, they do kind of have a nice kind of format where they start low, close to the stem, and will go up taller. Bees like to have a certain routine in how they will systematically select which flowers that they will be pollinating. It's really great, the variety of different shapes that the flowers naturally have a great diverse, different, whether they're flat or whether they're very bushy or very tiny individual flowers. So this system for the bees, for the Serviceberry or Saskatoonberry, it's really wonderful for bees to have that variety in which the shape, the flowers, and the pollen is laid out when they're pollinating. So here in the nursery we have actually something that's a really wonderful aspect of gardening. We always think about the planting aspect, but during the fall, what's another great activity for being with your plants and getting to know your plants in your garden is actually the seed saving process. So right now behind me here are the lupines, which are in full bloom, as we can tell. But what's really great is by the fall time, it's very, very simple, and it actually can be quite quickly. So when you're gathering and seed saving, it's a wonderful part for year-round connection to getting to know the plants you have in your garden and even in your neighborhood or your community. So this in the planter here is a tiny baby, and so it's the as you can tell, that nice size difference. So from when this is a plant that was grown from the saved seeds, so it's a really wonderful part for plants that you can collect the seeds in the fall or during their life cycle of seeding, that you can save them and you can grow them and create the little plant offspring. So they're very delicate at the smaller stage, but as you can tell, they do grow at a very wonderful level. They are really, really amazing pollinator attractants, and of course they're very beautiful. So it's a really wonderful process of watching, learning about the entire life cycle. These ones do require quite a bit of direct sunlight. We've got a nice fuzzy bumblebee right here. So as you can tell with the kind of patterns as they're selectively going around in circles, and it's very systematic in terms of telling which kind of individual flower has been pollinated in the process, and that does also leave quite a bit of room for a number of pollinators to all use it at the same time, and each flowering area is really open to a number of different pollinators. For different varieties of strawberry, we have the coastal strawberry. So this is really wonderful, whether you want to have larger bunches, even like in a hanging from the ceiling, or it can do very well in a number of different spaces. So maybe even on a smaller space, so looking at a patio, or if you have a balcony, or even if you have some window planting space available in your home. The strawberries are really great. They can definitely support bees. So even if, what I would love to think about is in an urban setting, if you feel like you don't have enough room for a big garden, or how can you support pollinators, even something hanging out over your window, that can make a huge world of a difference for our urban pollinators. So whether they're bees or other kinds of, even something like hummingbirds could even possibly come in near your windowsill. So when we think about in the city or in a very urban setting, there's such a lack of green space, and like I mentioned a little bit about different levels. So even if you have your apartment window with some strawberry hanging out the window, or on a balcony or patio, this will be really, really wonderful and definitely support the different varieties of bees who are traveling throughout the urban setting. Spring to summer, you can see these very tiny, delicate little white flowers. So the sorels are actually a little bit tasty. Because they are so delicate, for human use, you can kind of take a little pinch off and nibble. It's a little bit kind of like almost a little bit of sour taste, but they're really a beautiful, delicate plant. And so with having ground cover plants, that's very special, because there are a variety of indigenous bees who live underground for the most part, rather than what you think of as, for example, honeybees, who have the very large hives. So there are a lot of the indigenous bees will have more of a habitat that includes burrowing, so such as underground. And so having very small, low ground cover plants with flowers are also a very important part for bees. Sometimes even when they're very tired and exhausted, sometimes because they don't have enough water or they've been flying very far. So some bees that get quite tired, they really like to actually crawl. Even besides flying, they will kind of stay crawling low to the ground. So having these very small, low growing flowers really will support bees, and as we're mentioning at about many different height variance levels, a very low growing flower is very special for bees. Here we have the Broadleaf Stonecrop. As you can see, these are bright, beautiful, vibrant yellow. So while the actual leaves, they really kind of blend in. So if they're on the ground, you'll notice if it's kind of a gravelly or just different kinds of soil, it really just kind of blends in. It doesn't really stand out to pollinators, for example. But with this beautiful bright yellow color, it definitely is a great attractant for pollinators such as bees. And so the way that like other ground cover, it is very, very, very direly important to have that level variety for bees. So when we have certain indigenous bee species, they will like to kind of crawl and really just kind of walk close to the ground in between different times when they're flying around to pollinate. So it's really wonderful. As you can tell with the stem going up towards the flowers, it's just really a little kind of, almost looks like a little ladder. So a really nice, just think of when the bees are a little bit more tired or it's really hot out, having that more simple way for the smaller bees to be getting pollen and to have access to very low growing variety of flowering nectar and pollen producing plants.